Rajan, Executive Vice President, Meritrack Services. Professor Nupur Prakash. Is Professor Nupur Prakash here? Professor P. Rameshan, is he here? Professor A.H. Rajasar. Dr. M.C. Dilip Kumar. Standards in higher education. I welcome all our guests and especially our session chair, Dr. Sandhya Chintala, Vice President NASSCOM, who will be taking over the session. And I would just take a few seconds and then I would not like to come between the section and the chair. So from 20 universities and 500 colleges at the time India gained independence, higher education has developed into a large system and is in India among the largest in the world. This session deliberates upon the ways that are needed to address the concern of the quality and relevance of higher education in India. Can we please have Dr. Sandhya Chintala answer? Ma'am?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an extreme pleasure on my side to be here amongst you today and to especially talk about an important topic on standards with regards to assessments, accreditation, and even to looking at developments of all of this for higher education. Basically, we've got 5 speakers today, and we'll be looking after as a session chair. We've got a couple of hours, so we can really deliberate. What we will be doing is about 10 minutes to each of the speakers, and then we will have a Q&A session and a summation of the lot. So we can have, it's a little bit on a workshop as well as a panelist mode. So to come to the hard facts, basically from what ma'am has introduced as to what India was, today we are almost 700 universities, about 4,500 engineering colleges, and about non-engineering categorically it will be about 53,000 colleges. Now, I've been also said to host this in the area of ICT or IT and IT-enabled services. I hope that is okay with all of you in that particular area. There are about 31 sectors in the country that are doing extremely well. That will be automotive, security, you will have telecom, you have banking, financial services and insurance, you have agriculture, higher education per se or education per se, you have capital goods, logistics, you will have electronics, you'll have media and entertainment, construction and engineering, construction and utilities, and the list goes on. Each one of these sectors has basically said over the next 7 to 8 years, we have a requirement of about 150 million people to be employed. Now, there are 3 stakeholders that come into play. One is the supply side, where we have the academic community, but there is again a caveat there. We have a formal as well as a non-formal section. The area that I have talked to you about is the formal section, where you have the schools and the colleges in the existing program of education in the country. There is a huge non-formal section which is actually looked at by training providers who are bridging the gap between demand and supply, right? That is unregistered, but presently under the Government of India and under NSDC, there is a National Skills Development Corporation, a large number of these training providers are being recognized for the value they add, and they are actually bridging it. So we need to understand, if you have supply side, organized and unorganized, and you have the industry, and in between the two you have an assessor who basically tries to assess the competency of an individual to be able to bridge from the supply to the demand. What is required? Obviously there needs to be a quality assurance process, You need to set standards for this quality assurance process, and we need to understand how we can actually assess an institutional quality. We need to know how do we assess the competency and the quality of the individual, and how is it that the demand side or the other side with member companies is going to accept this. It's a huge change and churn in the ecosystem. India is ready for it, but basically we need to understand how is it this concept can actually convert into implementation when rubber hits the road. Towards this end, it's my pleasure to basically start off with one of the industry members, Mr. Jain, if you would come forward and offer your point of view. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Before I start, just a couple of words about myself and the organization I'm representing. I'm NC Jain, Vice President with News and Software Technologies. I'm heading the business development in India. So this organization called News and Software is a unique in itself in the sense it started in 1992. It's about 22 years now. And the only organization from India, in fact not only from India, because from the whole of Asia subcontinent, which is on Gartner's Magic Quadrant. And we currently operate in 57 countries. It was started by two IITians from Chennai, erstwhile Madras, and the company is based out of Delhi. We are government centers in Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Hyderabad. We got over 1,500 installations currently worldwide. And one of the most important deployment, which is LIC of India. That is the world's largest deployment on DMS and workflow. It currently has about 12 billion electronic documents used by over 150,000 people. Massive. And very, very proud that we did it for our client. We are also into imaging, which is ultimately leads to converting the papers into electronic version, meeting the world standards, for which Newgen has 42 patents on imaging and workflow. And proud to say we are the only organization having the patent rights on imaging in India. Having said that, one of the flagship products that we recently launched is on-screen marking, which is directly affecting most of you in this room for education. Just a little background on that product. There are two reasons why this product is today. One is, number of students are increasing day by day. Number of teachers that we need in the country, we know how shortfall we have for teachers and professors. Manually managing the entire process of education and examination assessment is very clumsy. Therefore, IT comes in and helps out the industry. That's one reason why this is. The second is, a couple of years back, and this leads to compliance. There was a case, which was actually goes in Kolkata High Court, where a student went to the board, it was 12th standard CBSE, and wanted a copy of his answer scripts because he was not happy with the result even after reevaluation. And it was upheld by Kolkata High Court that he should be given a copy of marked answer scripts. That was challenged Supreme Court. And in 2012, the Supreme Court agreed that all universities and education boards and institutions must provide a copy of ANSI scripts on demand. And that actually forced many of the institutions and universities and boards to look at how could they actually meet this compliance. It's not easy. I was in Allahabad a couple of weeks back, and in fact, UP Education Board, 62 lakhs students appear every year. And each one appears for 6 subjects. You can imagine the volume they have to process. And if they need to preserve it physically, those papers for years together, it is a lot of work. It takes effort, it costs a lot of money, and you're still not sure. After all, anything can happen. There could be flood, there could be fire, there could be natural calamities. You could lose those papers. But we are obliged to follow what the Supreme Court has said. If there is a request from students, we will have to oblige by providing that. And that's not the reason why this came into existence, whereby all those scripts are converted into electronic copies. Digitization or scanning, as we call them, we convert those physical papers into electronic versions, make it available to you on click of mouse, and just print it and give it. Of course, there are challenges. There are standards to be maintained, and time, which is a huge constraint in this particular vertical. Most of exams from starting result is published. Usually there's a window of about 45 to 60 days. The moment we start preparation for the exams, till we publish results. This small window every year. In most universities and academic, they follow annual system, but professional universities follow semester system. Now I'm told even the education boards have started following semester system. So that's the background why this whole process of on-screen marking came into existence. Of course, there are other reasons. But these are two main reasons I want to share with you. Look at the actual product, what really happens. We have taken it to the next level. It's not merely converting those papers into electronic versions anymore. It actually helps you, after the exam is conducted, the assessment that you undertake today by the teachers, professors, lecturers on physical papers, that actually is replaced by computer software. The assessment happens on computer itself, no more dealing with papers. So instead of converting these papers into electronic versions after or the post facto, you convert beforehand. Immediately after exam is conducted, collect all the papers, convert them into electronic copies, and provide it to the community, the teachers, professors, on computer itself. So they do actual evaluation on computer and not on physical paper anymore. That's how this product does. There are many advantages of doing that. One of them, the most critical, is errors, manual errors, human errors are eliminated. Second is result compilation. Moment a teacher marks a paper as done, result is ready. You don't have to wait for results to compile anymore. No more data entry. System will record the marks automatically. In your kits, there's a brochure in all of you which you can look at. This tells you the whole story, how it really happens. But just because I only have 10 minutes, I'll just share only the bullet points, and then we can discuss it. This is how it all happens. In 5 steps. We complete exam, we collect all those scripts. Of course, there's a mechanism to reconcile and compile those answer scripts. otherwise it goes topsy-turvy. You will have to take into consideration attendance for exams versus the physical papers that we receive. And then what we do is we convert them into electronic versions by scanning, make it available on computers. And evaluators will actually mark only on the computer itself. And result is compiled instantly. So just to add to what the slide shows here, many of those activities that you want to do on paper and you're not able to do, you will be able to do on computer. And it's highly sophisticated in the sense, it does not replace, and let me repeat, it does not replace the teachers. The system does not replace the assessor. No. And this applies only to descriptive papers, whereby you say maths, science, physics, literature, whatever it may be. Descriptive type of examination only, not online. And the teachers are still required as they are required in the current system. Marks, actual marks are allotted by teacher only, by reading. Instead of reading on paper, they will read on computer. Right? So we are not replacing teachers' community at all. The second thing I want to share is the way the system is designed, the way it operates. There's a fear when we go and talk to people in the universities and the boards. Hey, teachers are not computer literate. They are happy doing on paper. Will they be able to operate it? And let me tell you, today, if you are able to operate your cell phone, smart cell phone, whereby you receive SMS, you send SMS, receive emails, that's all you need to know. Absolutely nothing more than that. So computer literacy is more of a mental block. Like it happened in railways, it happened in banks, it happened in insurance companies, the same concept here. Absolutely no fear of not knowing computers. Absolutely simple to use. Touch screen. No keyboard is required, no mouse is required. Very simple, sophisticated. And after this, there will be interactive lessons. Should you have questions, please ask. And I'll be happy to respond to the extent I probably can. Right? Examination administration is critical. I mentioned beginning with reconciliation of how many students appeared, what subject they appeared, whether everything is available as results is critical, and we do that. System will take care of it. Manual reconciliation is not required anymore. Difference, if any, will be reported. Result, as I said, today what happens? You mark the papers, somebody will total it up, there will be mistakes, rereading paper, somebody got 105 marks out of 100. That doesn't happen here anymore. System will not allow. Okay. And compliance, extremely critical. You set your compliance standards, and system will meet it. Apart from what industry compliance standards are, this is built into system. You can even have your own local standards, and let system know about those, and system will address it. Absolutely flexible. You decide your standards. System is. Live marking, what it really means is, today, if your institute is scattered, distributed, let's say you have your colleges and schools in multi-cities, and everywhere evaluation happens. The controller sitting at corporate office or university or in the board would only know once the result is ready from each of the centers. Wouldn't know where is a delay if there is any. Here, you get instant dashboard. Everything, even one script is completed, is reported to your head office online. So you sitting in your head office get to know, as controller of the evaluation, there are 10,000 scripts to be completed. In particular city, let's say, city of Nasik, there's an issue. Somebody is not attending office, fallen sick, right? Distribution becomes a challenge in physical papers. Here, you redistribute instantly by click of mouse. From Nasik, you can give it to Mumbai, you can give it to Delhi, you can give it to Chennai. Redistribution. So you manage better. Critical part is you only have about 45 days to complete. And if one center delays, your entire result is delayed. That is at first. Many advantages of using it. And it meets the world standards. Just to tap on some of the advantages, quality. Now, what happens when I say quality? It means the quality standard for allocating marks. No, subjective, of course, it will ever remain subjective. Somebody may say, for this answer, I can only give 8 out of 10. No, somebody else can differ. This one is 8.5, 9, or 7, right? Because understanding can vary. Here what we do is, we provide the standards on computers every time you click. Same standard policy guidelines, including samples, are given and teachers can see it. Not only that, they can communicate online with head examiner. Lot of advantages, right? First time right, no errors. Centralized monitoring, as I said, you have full control. Massive saving. Massive saving. The reason is there's a huge cost we incur today on this examination assessment. Some of the cost is visible, some of the cost is hidden. It's not directly visible. It eliminates a lot of it. If you take a period of 3 to 5 years, your actual cost comes down by at least 1/3. And that is a huge surprise when we talk to them. Like, technology देते हैं, सस्ता कैसे हो जाएगा? But that's the fact. We have done it. Right? These are some of the benefits that we get. Many of them I can keep talking for hours and hours, but time is constrained. Thank you, and please ask me questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Very interesting. We'll hold the questions towards the end. So because we have a modus operandi of how we'll operate, I would now invite Professor P. Rameshan, Director, IIM Rohtak, to please present his point of view. Kindly store your questions. We'll definitely have an ample opportunity. Very interesting. There's one area, of course, Mr. Jain, I didn't see his exact cost. There was an overview of cost. I'm sure it is in everybody's mind. Wonderful innovation, and thank you for that information. Mr. Professor Rameshan.
afternoon to you all. I'll just focus a little bit on the accreditation part, quality signaling. Accreditation is getting popular now as a recognition cum signaling mechanism. Most of the institutions are trying to get one type of accreditation or recognition or the other. Ranking is also part of this accreditation process, but in a different way. I would like to emphasize that before I give a conceptual focus, quality in education should be in our mind. Many times we want quality, but we are unable to get quality internally. When that happens, we seek an external mechanism to get quality. Generally, there is a lot of resistance within the institutions for changing anything. Particularly faculty members, when faculty members are involved, it's extremely difficult to get things changed because at some point of time, all of us have been faculty members in some capacity if we are associated with educational academic institutions. We are happy with whatever we are doing currently and whatever way we are doing. So when we need to change, there is a lot of discomfort. That is why we all resist. When the higher management finds that it's very difficult to change things within the organization itself, one way is to somehow seek an external mechanism. And accreditation and ranking are in a way an external mechanism to also get things changed in the organization. Once we agree to go for accreditation or be part of the ranking, we need to produce data commensurate with the ranking scheme or accreditation. Therefore, willy-nilly, we have to change. And it may be easier once the faculty members agree to go for accreditation or to be part of the ranking. It may be easier for us to convince them, yes, these are the changes required. Because without these changes, we will not be able to do the accreditation or we will not get a good rank in the ranking scheme. Generally, if we take positively, this accreditation is a kind of signaling to the world, particularly the external stakeholders, as to where we stand as an academic institution, whether it's a college or an institute or a university. But there are two things which are the sources of brand development historically. These two sources are the growth and the quality. If you understand how actually reputation builds, it can be even achieved without external accreditation, provided there is a leadership which can take the trouble of convincing the faculty, if needed, taking a firm step and agreeing to go forward. There are two sets of reasons for the growth and quality. One set would be internal, the other would be external. I am presenting this to give you an understanding as to how we could proceed on this. The external reasons include opportunities. Why we grow? Because there are opportunities. Why we grow? Because the leadership is very aggressive. Plus other reasons. So now, which are the external reasons for growth and quality? Number one, opportunities. Number two, pressure. We all face pressure. One pressure is competitive pressure. Second is from the stakeholders. It could be, say for instance, as an IIM, we would be facing a pressure from the public. It could be the pressure from the MHRD, or as far as the management, top management is concerned, even the board could be an external pressure sometimes, because they may be under pressure from elsewhere. And then organization's tradition. For instance, a good organization will always have to keep itself good. A growing organization will have the urge to grow. It cannot stop. So what is the organization's tradition? Internal reasons for growth and quality are aspirations. All organizations need to have aspirations. In fact, for a long time, Indian institutions could not make a big impact on the world because we did not have so much of global aspirations. Whereas today, there are many institutions, like in the corporate sector, in academic sector also, there are many institutions which have developed their own aspiration to be something, not only in India, but outside India as well. Even the national institutions like IITs and IIMs were not having that kind of aspiration. That is why 50 years, if you look at the IIM or IIT history, you will not find anybody saying that to be a leader in the world is something that I cherish or I keep as a vision. But today, at least some institutions are saying that yes, we want to be something in the world. And second is leadership. Many academic institutions today have good leadership because even from different walks of life, people have entered the academic sector, academic institutions. But for a long time, that leadership did not have that kind of a charisma or urge or vision to move forward as a global force. And then economics and other reasons. Now, whatever the reasons, there is one brand identity, one manifestation of brand identity which we all need to consider. That is actually the customer acceptance. In educational institutions, we never consider our students as customers. But today, because of the awareness among the students and the potential students, today we need to accept that they are our customers because they have many mechanisms to control us. And the recent spread of social network itself is one of the major dreadful areas for us because whatever we do wrongly will be projected. So, and it will affect our reputation. And there is a need for giving signals. Delivery, of course, we need to give, but there is also a need to give signals. And assessment, evaluation, and accreditation, etc., would be giving this signaling. Yes, I know. This is my last slide. Sorry, not last. See, the constituents of evaluation generally in almost all the accreditation would be like this. Even ranking focuses on some of these factors. As you can see, age, size, processors, input quality, output, size and quality, infrastructure, perception and feedback, and so on. But it's also important to remember that there are certain vehicles of quality. Although assessment may be size, but actually what we are assessing is how faculty delivers it, how different other agencies are, vehicles are doing it. For instance, the faculty, the materials, the methods, the learning environment, and the student competence. For instance, IIMs can gloat about its high quality partly because we get top quality students. If we get bottom quality students, probably we also would have struggled. So what quality students you get is also very important. That is why we all need to have a very good admission process. But today many of the universities and private run institutions have a problem because many times because of the donation and other interventions they have to compromise. And there are also supporting factors like skill orientation of our programs, industry linkage, performance focus. To what extent do we focus on performance? Not only student performance, even faculty performance. If we don't have good quality faculty, we will not be able to provide quality. If our faculty members are not keeping their learning always in the forefront, they will not be able to keep up with the changing knowledge. And many leaders are not willing to take the trouble of really telling the faculty members that yes, this performance parameters will have to be achieved. If they do that, next day either they will not be there or their life will be very miserable for the rest of their term. This is what is happening in every academic institution. And academic discipline and the cost also matches. Many of the institutions may not be able to provide quality so much because they may not have the resources. Whereas for us, we get resources because of our high quality, and that self-propels. And this is the last word. Since it is internal organization that finally achieves quality, irrespective of the use of external accreditation or assessment, the key to achieving quality are internal actions. If external accreditation is achieved by managing facilitative factors specifically for the purpose, the actual quality profile of the institution will not change even if accreditation is achieved. I would like to show this also. That is, this is the general accreditation framework followed internationally. That is, setting goals would be the first step generally. If we have to prepare ourselves for the accreditation, international accreditation, setting goals for ourselves would be the first step we need to do. Second is preparing a strategic plan to achieve these goals. Third is specifying the action. And fourth is implementation of our plan. And fifth is the review, which would be by the external accrediting agency. And finally improving, and then again re-entering the cycle. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Rameshan, for that excellent presentation there. So obviously it's very clear that what has been said is for a brand of an institution to be in place, there are multiple internal factors that actually have to be taken into account. You have to have a process of reviewing and assessing that. So ultimately, there is an external goal that is achieved. One very interesting facet that you brought into space was the customer satisfaction. There's a customer who's an internal customer as a student, but there's also an external customer, which is basically the employer of that particular student. Both these facets have to be taken into consideration. So which means when the student actually joins the organization, his objective to join the organization has to be questioned. Is he joining the organization just to get a degree? Is he joining the organization for a higher education degree? Or is he joining for R&D? He wants to be an innovator, do research, or he wants to be employed. So an organization, like an institution of learning, must be able to cater to various facets for student satisfaction. Only when there is clarity in that aspect will you be able to tailor the programs of learning to be able to address that. Students actually enter in large numbers for a job, but the institutions of learning have to give them a higher education and knowledge. And there is the mismatch between industries of demand and the academic supply. Like you to think about it. In the next instance, to add more to that, may I invite Professor A.H. A.F. Ratsa, Vice Chancellor from Full University.
Actually, my lecture is not about accreditation or assessment. The organizers have placed me here and responsibility is theirs. I would like to talk on the scenario of Muslim education in India. In the inaugural session today, I was very happy to hear that they have given a lot of importance to minority. There is a separate session on minority education, which is really praiseworthy, and I praise the organizers for their commitment. As per the 2001 census, population of Muslims in India is 13.4%. That means in 2009, India's population was 120 crores and India's Muslim population was 16.1 crores. We cannot ignore this huge population as recorded in 2001 and 9 itself. So it is a duty of all the citizens of India to bring Muslims into the mainstream by the philosophy of access of education for all the communities in India. That is very important. Next one, if you see the growth of the population of major religions in the Indian scenario, compared with Muslims, in 1961 it was 10.7, and in 2001 it is raised to 13.4. As compared to the average of Indian population growth, Muslim population has increased. If average is 2.13, Muslim population is 2.7, Sikh population is 2.24, Buddhists 2.23, and others 3.38. As compared to the other religions, especially Hindus, the Muslim population has increased from year to year. And the share of the Muslims in younger age groups also is more. For example, age group 0 to 9, 1 to 9 it should be, male 27.1, female 27.4, and age 10 to 19 is 24.8 male, 23.8 female, and later the age group, in the age group 20 to 50 plus, it is gradually reducing. So what happens to those who are having the access for higher education is gradually declining as the age increases. This is the biggest question. In India, of course, in all the states, Muslims are there. More or less their representation as per the 2001 census is 13.4%, but now it is certainly more than 16 to 20% at present. But census is not done, and 2011 survey is not yet published. Major Muslim populated areas are Jammu Kashmir, Assam, West Bengal, and Kerala. Literary rate as compared to all other communities, it is a 2001 census. The literacy rate of Muslims is 59.1 as compared to SC/STs of 52.2, but at present the literacy rate of SC/ST will be definitely more than Muslims. There is a notion that Muslims go for their study for madrasas, etc. But Muslim children going for the madrasas is 4% only. They go to private schools 30%, government school 66%. But the problem is the students from primary education, when they move from secondary education and then for the higher education, their dropout rate will be more. The reasons are many. Their economic condition and attitudes of the parents, attitudes of the society towards them. There are many reasons. Now I would like to add on the madrasas. Earlier in madrasas, they used to study Arabic only and Quran. But now Muslims have realized, at least the educated Muslims have realized that in addition to Arabic, they should be taught in Urdu and also the regional language and English also, so that they will have better access for the higher education in the later days. That's very important. And we should also connect madrasas to various institutes of higher education, so that the students who study in madrasa are in maktabs. There is another way of education for Muslims known as maktabs. We should connect madrasa and maktab to the other institutes, so that Muslim children can mix with the other children and they can grow in a more healthy manner, and tomorrow they will have less problems. Higher education scenario, 77% of the population aged 20 years and above are graduates or they hold diploma, while only 4% of the Muslim population have that access. The gap between Muslims and other socio-religious groups also increases as the level of education increases. The unemployment rates among Muslim graduates is the highest among socio-religious groups, socio-religious categories, both among the poor and the non-poor. So this is a very peculiar situation with regard to the Muslim community. As the unemployment rate increases, as the education level increases amongst the Muslims. My question is, if Muslims are given only, or they are having only 4% of the access for higher education, what happens to the 96% of the other persons? Where are they going? Why they are not getting education? If the education is not given to Muslims, it is not only they suffer, the whole nation will suffer. Other communities will suffer. We have to take, it is the responsibility of the country and the citizens to take care of them, those 96% of the Muslims who have no access for higher education. This is very serious. That is why the inclusive philosophy must be adopted with all seriousness. If we keep them happy, everybody will be happy. This is the age group, and then as the age group increases, dropout rate increases. Dropout rate increases. Where they go? Maybe they go for washing the car, or do some business in the streets, or they may be petty business in bus stands. This is the scenario, socio-economic scenario of the Muslims. I give only one. This slide is more important to me. This is the situation, educational situation, especially in South India and my university. General merit students 5.94%, SC/ST about 18%, ST 7%, category 1 7.8%, least is for 2B. 2B is 5.34%. In South India, especially university, general university like me, 5.34% of the Muslims get admission in higher education. So what happens to the rest 95% is another question. Now, if you analyze this last column, I have put it as a gain here. SC/ST reservation is 15% all over country, but in addition to 15%, they get extra seat of 2.89 by their merit. Whereas STs, 4% extra seat they get by merit. Other socio-religious groups also 18%, 11% extra. Because of the policy of the government with regard to the reservation, SC/STs, they are better off, better than, I can say, Muslims. Now it is necessary to make policies at the state government level, central government level, to bring Muslims into the higher education stream. Otherwise, education cannot go in the proper way. As we think of all the quality in the education, if the Muslims are not given access for higher education, then you cannot expect the country to grow in an equilibrium manner. Employment scenario, Muslims are least employed in the government and as well as other undertakings. And IAS, IFS and Home Department, they are not, Army, they are not represented. And within Muslims also, there are some communities which are least privileged. They are Ashrafs, Ajlafs and Arzals. It is necessary to include policy to make reservation for the backward communities in Muslims also. And with this I end up here. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rajasthan. It was extremely interesting to note this particular point of view. May I now invite Mr. Nagendra Sundarajan to basically speak on the assessment process from Meritrack.
Dr. Sandhya, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. By looking at the topic, you will think that it's going to be a repeat of the same that my colleague Mr. Jain presented. But let me tell you, this is not about Meritrack. We're not going to talk about product or the company. I'm going to share here my personal experience as a professional on what actually this community, the higher education community and the education community in the country has achieved in this space. So the people here can understand on what are the trends that are happening in the industry as of now. Just to give you some quick snapshot, these are some of the paper clippings that have been picked up over the last 1 year. All of them have come in various newspapers, and this is what we regularly see. Even today, as we speak, something similar to this came in the morning. Few students have pulled out some answer scripts from the stitched answer group, and they have inserted in a medical university. This is there in today's newspaper. If you really look at it, this gets reported almost regularly or more frequently than what it used to be in the past. Now, let me tell you, on-screen marking, people have been, I'm sorry if I'm differing with Mr. Jain, my colleague, a bit there. He talked about something new from his side, but this is not new to India. On-screen marking is running for the last 3 years in the country, and before we move ahead, I would like to tell what this community has done in the last 3 years. They're on the right-hand side first. Okay, one of the largest premier board in the country has done millions of scripts, both for 10th standard and 12th standard answer scripts, and they have deployed this technology over the last 2 years successfully. Around 30% of the scripts have already gone on-screen marking, both for 10th standard and 12th standard. I think we should applaud the initiative taken by the board and the chairman. It's a great work by this community. The whole initiative was started about 2 years back, and it started with a small pilot, and last year it really went on a large scale, and the whole program is successful. The next one, in fact, that technical university's vice chancellor, I do not know, his name was here today. There is another technical university that is successfully deploying on-screen marking solution for the last 2 to 3 years, and they've been successful. I'm not, please remember, note, I'm here to talk about what's happening in the industry by you gentlemen, not about Meritrack. Not necessary that Meritrack may have employed, so I'm not talking about that here. About 3 months back, a medical university deployed on-screen marking solution, because in medical field, a script gets marked twice or thrice. Minimum twice, and if there is a big difference, they have a policy of going for the third one. There is a medical university that has collaborated, the campuses are across the globe, multiple countries. Doctors sitting in various countries have marked the scripts, and they are using this on-screen marking successfully. There is a big plus here, because once a doctor is marking a script, it's very difficult because they don't write anything on the script because they don't want the biasness to come in the next marker. So they use a cover page. All of you are aware of this process. It is a lot more stringent in the medical field. I'm sure you are aware. So this technology has been a big boon in the medical field. There is a large distance education university that is using this really to come out with the results in less than a month. Just think of how many distance education universities in the country is able to come out with a result in less than a month or max 40 days. Primarily because they deployed on-screen marking and they are able to make it with markers across the country. I also just want to tell you that there are a lot of retired professors and teachers who are being employed by the university and they are being given jobs. So, when we talk about successful implementation, so what are the challenges in the conventional one? All of you are aware, my friend spoke, maybe I'll just touch upon slightly there. First is, a physics or a chemistry teacher or a mathematics teacher or a professor, whoever you take, They are very good in marking an answer script even if you wake up at midnight, 1 o'clock. They'll be doing it again and again, there are no issues. But the moment you ask them to start posting those answers, the marks in the cover page, after 10 scripts, they get bored and the monotony sets in. That is where the error comes in. Posting it on the cover page is the biggest problem. And after 10, 15 scripts, they lose the tempo and at times they may tend to miss 1 or 2 scripts. Let me come back. Imagine that how many students today who are writing 10th or 1st standard in the country do have money to pay for a re-evaluation? Do they have money? Only very few affluent students or students coming from affluent families are in a position to pay the money, or they have to be confident. They will go and tell the parent that, look, I wrote very well and I want this to be re-evaluated. So the basic errors, more than 40% of scripts are having errors with respect to totaling or the marker missing in question paper. We are talking about the career of students. So this technology completely eliminates the basic 2 errors there. In addition, you just go and check out the paper in the morning. The moment you move the script, there are a lot of scripts that get transported, issues in logistics, people pull out scripts and then insert something. Imagine if there is a doctor who is getting passed through such methods and we are going to put our kids or family in front of the doctor. That's not the one that we want, right? So security with respect to scripts have become a big issue, and that is another area that is being addressed by this technology. As we move forward, lack of availability of good quality markers within a region is becoming an issue, and that is why few large universities are unable to come out with their results in time. Possibly it's time to collaborate, and this technology is allowing you and helping you to collaborate. And another part is that multiple evaluations of a single script are possible, and these are all the challenges that have been seen, and on-screen marking solution clearly solves all these issues today, and it's been solved by many higher education institutions and boards over the last 3 years. So we are not talking about something new, we are talking about something that is being done by this community successfully in India over the last 2 or 3 years. So what are the key contributors to enhance adoption? First thing is very strong commitment from the top management and the committee or the institution's board. There has to be a strong will and commitment that yes, we will go for it. Once you go with that, a lot depends on picking up an experienced service provider. Maybe as a professional, I would say that please don't evaluate once, evaluate continuously. Don't pick one, pick 2 or 3. You also get to pick up the best practices from everybody. Put them on a continuous evaluation mode. I'm sure over a period of 1 or 2 cycles, you will be in a position to pick who is the best and who you can actually place your confidence with. That's the way it works in this, and we have seen that many universities have gone in that mode. So, knowledge of examination, look for someone who is in testing and assessment, who can understand examination and just not scanning. It's just not a software game, it has got something to do with testing and assessment, which is core to an education institution. Yeah. Now, so what determines quality of on-screen marking? We spoke about it. It's a well-defined mark scheme, quality assurance process, marking tools. See, ensure that, for example, you should normally have annotations tools that are shown there. If there is a mathematics paper, you should be able to check whether an angle of the angle shown in a graph can be measured, or those tools are available. In addition, you also have the next level marking or the HEs who are looking into the 10% of the script. So those processes should have been built into your overall answer script so that head examiners can pick up randomly and then review them. Another part is quality of delivery. So what is most important in any on-screen marking solution is quality of delivery. The biggest part is error-free scanning. There are service providers who have done 3 crore, 4 crore, 5 crore images in 20 days, 0 error. It's available today on record in this country. Okay, and there has to be automation included in your overall scanning, otherwise you will get into the problem of someone missing the answer script or misplacing it. So these are all, insist on automation in scanning process and then look for process there. That's important. Okay, we spoke on security, we spoke on ensure that even the digitized script is not taken physically through a CD or through a hard disk, so that people don't bring in any malpractice. So overall flexibility is the key, and marker flexibility should be allowed to either mark from home or from a university or the educational institution's premise, and multiple marking is the need today. Of course, we also spoke about RTA query. You can pull the script with a click of a mouse if you want to mark again. But I want to share these 3 case studies quickly. Maybe I have another minute, that's what I presume. First is, we talk about a case study that has happened here in the country. We talked about a school board. Each service provider have done about 1 million script, and this is done over 25 cities across the country. In our country, I'm not talking about some other example somewhere else. It's a premier education board in the country, and over 6,000 markers have participated. The whole project got over in 30-35 days. In fact, the board was able to release the results faster, though that was not the primary objective. The primary objective was to improve the quality and efficiency and serve the students better. Second one, a large distance education university, they have about at least 1 million scripts in every cycle. They're able to release the results within 35-40 days. I'll just take 30 seconds, Dr. Sandhya. So they're able to release the results within 30 days, while quite a few other distance education universities are trying to figure out how someone is able to get back to the students faster with the results. The third one, this is very interesting for everybody here. Here is an example of someone, there are about 150 teachers and professors who are marking the answer scripts of students who have written examination in UK. This is for a specific assessment body. Papers like English, ICT and Math come to India. So answer scripts of native English speakers are getting marked by our school teachers in Bangalore successfully for the last 3 years. In terms of quality parameter, we scored far above the teachers from UK. There was actually a public outcry in UK saying that how can you take these jobs to India, because it's like how you have this IT or IT is outsourcing the whole answer scripts will also get back to India. Gentlemen, please remember that that's the opportunity that is looking at this community. If you deploy on-screen marking over a period of time, we as a community, as a country, we are very good in science and math. Think of marking the answer scripts of science and math scripts of the entire world. That's an opportunity. For that, we will have to implement ourselves, get used to the system to get to the opportunity. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Nagendran. It was an excellent rendition. I think 2 communities. One is all of us for actually having a double whammy of the information. It's extremely interesting. The last one is opens up a global opportunity for being the back end of the world, for assessing the rest of the world. It's a huge business opportunity. And sir, you have actually got a free promo on marketing skill. The next person on, I would have the pleasure of calling Mr. M.C. Dilip Kumar, Vice Chancellor, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit.
Most respected Chairperson Dr. Sandhya, dear co-speakers, dear brothers and sisters. I am coming from Kerala representing Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Karadi, the birthplace of Adi Shankara. And my best friend Dr. Khader Mungat, actually his name is Abdul Khader, Dr. Abdul Khader, representing the Kannur University as Vice Chancellor, is also with me. Hearty welcome to Kerala to visit the gods of country. I am directed to present a paper relating to the role of assessment, accreditation, evaluation and quality standards in higher education. The organizers are expected a particular paper relating to this topic. At the outset, let me express my profound gratitude and deep appreciation to be invited to this auspicious event. It is my pleasure to join with such great educationalists who are committed towards reforming higher education. Higher education is the backbone of any society. It is the quality of higher education that decides the quality of human resources in a country. However, quality evaluation and assessment of higher education are fairly new features of education till 1990. It was believed that quality was implicit in university education, but gradually the concept of external evaluation came to be accepted. Today, it is widely recognized that the development of effective mechanism for quality assurance is critical to successful higher education. Quality is often described as the totality of features and characters of a service that bear on its ability to satisfy its stated objectives. Quality in higher education, according to Article 11 of the World Declaration on Higher Education published by the United Nations, is a multi-dimensional concept which should embrace all its functions and activities, teaching and academic programs, research and scholarship, staffing, students, buildings, faculties, equipment, service, the community and the academic environment. It should take the form of internal self-evaluation and external review conducted openly by independent specialists. Quality assessment of higher education can bring in several explicit and implicit benefits. It is argued that without some form of monitoring and accountability, we cannot reward and recognize the excellent. The threats and rewards inherent in quality assessment provide motivation for all, individually and collectively, to do better. Quality assessment can both identify and disseminate good practices by seeing what is working elsewhere. Academicians, in their peer review role, can understand and practice new ideas. Quality assessment can lead to improved relationship and more and better collaboration between academic staff. By distributing the status quo, quality assessment can lead to change and innovation. But the difficulty becomes how to maintain innovation when assessment becomes a routine. The external quality assessment can be utilized as a management tool to drive through changes that would not otherwise have been possible. Besides, quality measurement of higher education is rationalized for various political, economic, and societal reasons. Political reasons include the need of government to ascertain that funds allocated to higher education are being used effectively for programs and services. Economic reasons justify assessment to ensure that colleges and universities produce graduates who constitute a well-trained, competent workforce. Societal reasons refer to the broader public interest in the quality of higher education. Society needs to understand what higher education is offering and how it is meeting the needs of the public. External quality assurance in India. Quality assurance in higher education worldwide is founded on assessment, evaluation, and accreditation of higher learning centers. The oldest system of accreditation is that of the USA, which emerged between 1885 to 1895. In developing countries, such a system emerged only in 1990s. India adopted the assessment and accreditation system in 1994 with the establishment of the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAAC, in brief, in 1994. The major driving forces for accreditation in India were basically the expansion of the system and the growing diversification of institutions within the context of diminishing public resources for higher education. There arises the private-public participation. Today there are 4 academic bodies that evaluate institutional programs quality through the accreditation process in India. The National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAAC, established by the UGC in 1994, which accredits institutions of higher education. The next one, the National Board of Accreditation, NB, established by AICTE in 1994, which accredits programs in engineering and related areas. The Accreditation Board, AB, established by the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, in 1996 for accredited agricultural institutions. And the last, the Distance Education Council DEC established 1985 by EU, which is mandated to accredit distance education units. Outcomes of the accreditation process in India. The process of assessment and accreditation carried out by these agencies has created a tremendous momentum among the academia on issues pertaining to quality. The impact analysis revealed that the assessment and accreditation process made a significant change in all aspects of institutional functioning, pedagogical, managerial, and administrative. The institutions have become more open and sensitive to the needs of the shareholders or the stakeholders. The need to keep abreast the changing trends was felt by one and all, and institutions now found it easier to introduce innovations as everyone realized the importance of copying the needs of the present world. The reaccreditation cycle has helped to strengthen the initiatives created by the first accreditation cycle. 2 minutes. Major challenges to higher education and external quality assessment. The new higher education environment is challenging the very foundations of traditional accreditation and raising questions about whether accreditation must undergo a more fundamental transformation. There are at least 4 major developments that are challenging the existing accreditation system. Global competitiveness and quality is the first one. Concerns over the ability to compete globally and maintain the quality of our higher education system are increasing. A strong higher education system is critical to future economic competitiveness and provides the major corridor to economic success for students and workers. In this environment, the focus on meeting minimum quality standards is no longer sufficient. It is necessary to put out higher education on the journey to perform excellence in a higher competitive world. The next 2 points I am not ready to discuss because time is very precious. There is a red card to me to stop the proceedings. So the next point is changing structure of higher education. Having certain important points are there and shift towards assessing performance of excellence and increased demand for accountability is also to be considered. Specific issues in India are to be addressed and methodological issues are very important to consider in the relevant time, and assessment of foreign education providers is to be considered because of the globalized economic system and education system, because in our fingertip everything is ready, everything is available. So whether we are able to stand in our own shoes by keeping the so-called system without fluctuation. Of course, fluctuation is needed, flexibility is needed by considering the environment, the economic environment, the global environment, the educational scenario. We should open our eyes towards the global changes, and we should adapt technology to our side and to change the system to develop the education system of India to uplift the grade to a higher level. And adoption of global competitive assessment, etc. is to be considered. I am not discussing. One point to the scientists or otherwise those who are sitting in front of me, especially the software technology developers. Sanskrit is the #1 language that is ready to accept by a system, I think so. Sanskrit. Whether there is any opportunity to explore the Sanskrit, because I am representing the Sanskrit University of Kharadi, then whether there is any possibility, if there is any possibility, I am ready to provide hundreds and hundreds of research scholars, then PhD holders and postgraduate students for your help, and it will increase an environment for getting some job opportunity to my students. There are 23 departments in Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit Kharadi. There are 23 research departments. Actually, postgraduate courses are going on. MPhil PhD is going on. Integrated PhD is going on. And certain important areas are also there. Then especially dance, music, etc. Then PhD programs are there. Mural painting, maybe the #1 in South Asia. Mural painting department is there. So it is a unique institution. Most welcome to Kerala, and as a good friend, I wish to welcome you to Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit Karadi for further discussion and for exchange for programs, etc. etc. Nice meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip Kumar, for an extensive rendition of the various organizations that are doing accreditation and in the country, and about the information on Sanskrit and its various facilities that all of us can be avail. One of the things that I'd like to leave with you is accreditation has to actually have customer recognition, and just not to the country and to the globe. Most of the accreditation policies and norms that are put in place in India today have a huge amount of weightage put for the inputs. Much of it is excluding the outputs, or if the outputs are there, that is basically again coming back to customer requirement, customer satisfaction, etc. and how this output, which is usually a student or the knowledge that is actually put into place, is helping this individual be a lifelong learner and to be gainfully employed. Right? So these are outcomes which are mentioned in the latest versions of NAAC, National Assessment Accreditation Council, in the AICTE norms, but the weightage given is very little. Because the weightage is so small, what happens is the ranking of our colleges still finds very low positions in the global ranking market. And India has an opportunity to become one of the outsourced bodies in the world for actually providing top-class education if we are able to actually position ourselves very well. So our next person on I would like to actually invite here is Professor H.S. Dhami, Vice Chancellor, Kumar University.
Presentation is on very informative presentation on this accreditation. I'm grateful to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to present my ideas. This pen drive is not working. So this is the concept of academic accreditation is associated with the idea of quality, which has become one of the most widely discussed topics in many countries. During the past decade, for a variety of reasons, country. However, it can be said that the most important factor that lies behind this concern for quality is in the field of higher education are related to the broad extension of higher education. So, in fact, I wanted to emphasize on, you see, when we speak in global terms, our country However, we have top institutions in our country. We have IIT, we have IIMs, but no one of them find place in top 3. This Punjab University Chandigarh has found a place in, I think, about 351 rank. No one of our top universities, top IITs, they find place even in Asia in top 30. So the concern for today is that whether we have to go for this Times higher ranking system, or we should have some idea, we should reformulate some of the questions so that Indian universities or Indian institutions could also find a place here. So my first concern is that when we speak of education, and we generally produce bureaucrats, we generally produce politicians, we produce scientists, we produce engineers, doctors, but we never think of producing good human beings. The concern of education should be around production of good human beings who may have concern for their fellow beings. The learning to know aspect has to be broadened. We should think of learning to know. We should think of learning to do. We should think of learning to be, and we should think of learning to live together. And the education has to be value-based. So far as Times ranking is related, they are marked on the basis of performances, on the basis of patents, on the basis of international collaborations, but never give importance to the concern of the university students or university fraternity or their social issues. Some calamity. I have come from a place which is prone to disasters. You must have heard last year, 2013, about the Uttarakhand disaster, which happened in Kedarnath, and such type of mishappenings can happen there any time. If the students of the region think for the care of their fellow beings, they take care of their fellow citizens, they take care of native places, some importance has to be given for their concern also. So that must be one of the aspects. There should be concern for this value-based education. There should be concern for this value-based education is one of the aspects. They are concerned for the society is another aspect, and the upliftment of the society must be the third aspect. These 3 things I would like to have this. I wanted to hammer here, and then, however, the presentation was on all about how the accreditation process goes on. NAAC is there. NAAC is doing very well, good job. But one thing we must emphasize here. This is a forum where we can discuss all these aspects. So the aspect is that the NAAC is supposed to accreditate all the institutions in the country, and there is a huge rush. Every university which is applying, that gets its turn after 6 months or about 8 months or about 1 year. So there must be some accreditation at the state level also. We must think on that, these aspects also. Then there is, whenever there is accreditation is of the institution. I think that accreditation must be of the programs also. Accreditations must be of the programs also. Say some university is excelling in one aspect. So that accreditation may be based on that aspect. Say, I want to go for chemoprevention, I want to go for pharmacogenomics, and I want to produce some medicines based on herbs of that region. So on the whole, it will not serve the purpose. But if it is made specific, it is made program based, so that will serve the purpose. At least we can concentrate on some of the aspects. So these are some of my inputs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nami. It's a very important aspect actually in an institution accreditation. And institutional accreditation, what is put in place, quite often it is infrastructure accreditation. Sometimes it's more input on the number of faculty, but very rarely do you look at the pedagogical aspects. How much of the pedagogy is actually put in place to deliver what is meant to be that program? Also, we would like to know is the content accreditation. Many of you don't have standards in the content part of it, and therefore is the content actually relevant to the times? Is the content actually delivering to market forces, national and international? Very little points are actually put into place. So these aspects actually need to find space in our accreditation process. One is to have customer satisfaction, that's the end of it. But the beginning is one is an institution, but in this present scenario with virtual universities are coming into place, how much importance is there for a table and a chair? More importance is to be put on the delivery mechanism, whether the delivery is actually learning, is reflecting multiple learning styles, is it addressing an ecosystem where different type of people in different age groups are actually learning, because nowhere is now in this existing ecosystem that you actually learn just once. In this IT BPM industry, you find that at least the job role for an individual over a span of 25 to 30 years, he's changing 18 job roles. And there has to be a learning and a training at every couple of years that goes on. How is our educational system, virtual, face-to-face, or going to be through workshops, or going to be on a self-instruction learning mode, actually going to be addressed? So does the university system or any other formal system of education actually address all of this? Then it makes the package. So why India is not actually ranking very high than international is, international accreditation packages, I'm using the word very carefully, address a plethora of requirements which is highly customer-centric. We are still focused on one particular area of pedagogy and the delivery mechanism. It is improving, it is making more. But the need of the hour is for organizations like yourself, both formal and non-formal, and providers of solution which are provided by Mr. Jain and Mr. Nagendra, is to come to a consensus, say, how quickly can we leapfrog so that our students will actually find a space, and various aspects of assessment, accreditation and evaluation found actually one part of the whole ecosystem. With this, let me open this door for question and answers from the audience who are very august speakers. Yes, sir, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have a very serious question and a very serious observation. And I'm particularly pointing out what Professor A.H. Rajasaheb, I think, is the Vice Chancellor. Yes, he just presented one very interesting study, and he came to the conclusion that Muslims are not getting a proper space in the higher education sector. But I think he's totally wrong in his assessment and his study. Thing is this, in his studies he found out that 67% population in Jammu and Kashmir is Muslim. And second, 36.9% population from Assam is Muslim. I am from Assam. But my point is this, in Assam the total scenario of higher education is so bad, so deplorable. Less than 10% students of that age group, they go to the higher education. Probably the same thing is there in Jammu and Kashmir. It is not on the basis of religion. This deprivation is on the basis of some other regions. It is because we are infested with insurgency. The same thing is there in Jammu and Kashmir. If we make a kind of study in Delhi, the Muslim population in Delhi, I find that more than 80% will be getting the chances of getting to the higher education. But in the remote areas, in my places, most of the Muslim people are living in the alluvial areas, in the Brahmaputra shore and all these things. They are not getting any chance to come to the schools. That is the reason why these people are getting a kind of That's the wrong thing. But I think the professor, this Vice Chancellor has pointed out, regions are there in the socio-economic and other things. That is one thing. And second important point I'd like to just add here is that I think another Vice Chancellor pointed out that it is we should try to go to make a kind of quality education, and Japan is getting more and more production of Nobel laureates, not in India and all these things. But the problem is not like that. The question comes how to accommodate these Muslim people and other people who are so backward. And if we want to make a kind of quantitative enhancement of higher education, then quality will be almost, there's every possibility of suffering to quality. And what is the priority for the government? We are finding that in India, the central government and also state governments, they are trying to make them more and more inclusive higher education. And that is why quality is something else. If 90% of people go to the higher education, I think within 10 years we'll be getting hundreds of, or that much of, Nobel laureates in our country.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your observation. As Professor said, there was a little diversification from the original topic, but it was a point well taken, saying he's representing a minority community. That's all. So his observations from their point of view was that there should be a need to basically address all minority communities so they get equal opportunity. Your point of view is very well taken, is that it's not based on the minority, but it is based on other socio-economic factors which are in the state, which actually reflect the lack of educational opportunity in the higher education space. Right, sir. That is all that is.
What I would like to add.
Yes. Yes.
The data which I have given is not the data prepared by me. It is the data presented by the Sachar Committee, 2006.
That entire concept is
Please hear me. The Sachar Committee is based on the data available earlier to 2006. You are talking about the present scenario. You may also be right. But Sachar Committee bases its data earlier to 2006. That's very important. Muslims, I am talking not about religion, a group. They are deprived of the educational opportunities due to their economic backwardness. It is necessary to improve them, bring them to the mainstream. Then only we can live happily. All can be happy.
Yes, point taken. It is, as Professor there has also said, that this is just not representative of a particular community, but for all in this particular scenario. So there is a collective requirement for us to recognize that there should be a need to provide an opportunity to step up there. Thank you so much, sir. So, madam, please. Let's quickly come back to the quality process. Very interesting, and there's a lot of information otherwise.
I think by and large, the problem involved in the deterioration of academic standards, in the participation of higher education, and the inability to cope, have resources to cope with it. And the accreditation process is just trying to help out in improving the system. So you cannot immediately move from an input to an output-based system. Actually, I am on the NAAC committee, so I am here to represent the NAAC point of view. And it has systematically been improving. We are moving towards an outcome-based system, but if you were to do it immediately, institutions would be discouraged. Nobody would go for accreditation. So as accreditation takes place successively once in 5 years, I think every cycle improves upon the previous cycle. And the process here is an enabling process. Of course, if you were to go for ABET or the international accreditations, they are all outcome-based. And eventually we'll perhaps move towards that system, but now we have made a good start, and it's good if many more institutions get into the system. I also want to clarify saying that there are departmental accreditations done by NAAC. NAAC also does departmental accreditations.
But there's a difference between departmental and program accreditation.
Yeah, program accreditation is also done by NAAC, but people don't go in for it because it's expensive.
Yes. No, but I think, yes, sir, please. Yes. Okay, sir, Professor back. Please, before one request, please introduce yourself and then say the question.
I'm Professor G.L. Datta. I happen to be the former Vice Chancellor and Chancellor of the University in Andhra Pradesh. About accreditation, what I would like to say is, yes, NAAC does have department accreditation in the system on, but NBA, National Board of Accreditation of AICTE, does take care of programs. In mechanical engineering, for example, there could be 10 master's degree level programs, and all 10 programs got to be accredited separately. So for program-wise separate accreditation is there, and for all programs, including for departmental level programs, etc., by NAAC, I know the system takes care of all aspects. Maybe in the NAAC accreditation, table chairs also play a role. It's there, but that's part of the whole system. Or even in the case of ABA accreditation, it is in totality that we talk about. Because I have also had a wonderful experience of working there.
So I'm here only wearing my small hat of an industry which employs around about 3 million people and generates about $110 billion annually. And we are the fastest growing industry here. But one of the things we have noticed, because this is our submission to all of you, because we are partners in this game, is that the change that is happening in the ecosystem is not being reflected quickly enough in the supply side. And therefore, the accreditation process to ensure the quality between supply and demand being matched must also change quickly enough. That is my only submission to you. Because whatever is in 2006 or 8, it's so different. For this particular industry body, if I have job roles identified about 1 year ago, every 6 months it's changing. Technology, your own cell phone, you will not want to use beyond 1 year. Then how can the educational system for developing the technology of the cell phone be redundant for 10 years? So the only thing is, can quality, if it is actually saying that anybody who comes out certified with a particular competency is available to have a good livelihood and good values, obviously, that sir has spoken about, then there must be some changes which are quickly captured. And ma'am, with you being in the process there, I think that will be a submission from our side. Please, sir, next. Yes, sir, on the back. We have got time for another 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll close. Yes, ma'am, please.
Dr. Sunday, I think my question is more to you.
Madam, introduce yourself, ma'am.
I'm Vishaka Nanayakkara from the Ministry of Higher Education, Sri Lanka, and also a lecturer in computer engineering. So, now, as you said, a fast-growing industry where the skills required are changing rapidly. What you were saying, even the accreditation process would not really capture some of these needs.
Correct.
So, isn't it? I don't know. Thinking about, can there be accreditations by organizations like you? In your case, it's NASSCOM. In my case, it's SLASSCOM, the Sri Lankan equivalent of it. Because otherwise, the lead time that you need for things to happen, when you say we need these type of graduates, by the time it comes into our process, you have gone like 2 cycles ahead.
Yes.
So, would organizations like NASSCOM have a role to play or to work with academia in introducing different type of a ranking? I mean, if you take SAFIA, the SFIA framework, which is one example I could think about.
So, ma'am, in consideration of that, the Government of India and 17 ministries in the Prime Minister's office have taken cognizance that higher education has 2 major facets. One is to provide for the services industry, another one for actually providing for R&D, innovation, product development. Presently, if I were to take a case in point of this particular industry, we have about exports of $1 billion, say. But in about 3 years, our imports will be $300 billion because we will be paying the license fee to the rest of the world, wherein our Indian students are actually doing the product in international countries because there's an ecosystem there which actually helps. So in consideration of that, there has been a serious thinking whether industry should be a part of the process, which is actually a regulatory process. But if you look at the countries in the world that are doing extremely well, it is actually self-accreditation. There is no accreditation, because that is where you actually have a process where you don't have a mandatory regulatory body, but you're open to keep improving, and market forces. So if your child is wanting to get the best in the world, you go to Harvard or a Yale or a UCLA because it's an open accreditation system. He declares that he is the best, market forces proves that he is the best. So the question that comes back is, do you want an archaic accreditation system which is not moving, or do you want to declare? If a university says, I am ready to take on the remaining part of the world and improve myself, why should you be held back? Then you declare it. So self-accreditation, we did an analysis and see what are the various types of accreditation processes in the world, and we found most of them say self-accreditation is working. USA does not follow a regulatory process. There is no NAC, they have an EBET process, but that's only counsel and guidance. It does not say that you must have. Many often in our universities in our country, it says if I follow to the norm what is given by AICTE, I'm doing good. But they're not looking at the other end is what's happening to the end customer. So therefore there is a big problem. So we are quite open to that, but it takes a little bit of a process to follow. Anybody else? Questions?
My question is,
please name it. So you can name it Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary, anybody, or you can say Shastra, whatever name. The student is right. Because your question is wrong. You should have said, please name it or say this figure which is there, what is the biological name? So like this, when we analyze the papers of teachers writing questions, huge ambiguity. So you cannot blame the student for writing differently. So it's very important for us to basically to actually help, because when we at industry prepare questions on employment assessments, the people say, give us a question bank. So we actually took computer science, we took EEE, we took IT and mechanical, and then with the help of Professor Natarajan from BITES, who was ex-AICTE chairman, because Professor Mata of course agreed, we actually mapped all the 4-year papers, the curricula, to the outcomes. There are no outcomes mentioned. Then we said, what are the industry outcomes? We wrote it. Then we mapped it to the Washington Accord. We found absolute cohesion there. Then we said, how will you basically assess? Most of our question papers were lower order thinking skills. And here we're looking on critical thinking, evaluation, etc. There is no question. So we tried a reverse engineering, it will be out in another couple of months, where we actually articulated the questions, and then we were asking the student, what will be the pedagogical approach the faculty will take to ensure. Now, when that sort of higher order critical thinking, the answer is open to you now, sir. You will basically say how you want.
Thank you, ma'am. So I just said in my presentation, we are not replacing teachers. Teachers' job will be made what they are doing today. What we are doing is we are creating a process through software to assist the teachers, so that extra effort they put on women or manual work they don't need to do is actually taken care by computer. Intelligence for actual marking is not in the software as of today. It might happen tomorrow, I don't know.
See, there are internationally proven softwares available. Here we have actually tried to push that system of evaluating a marker, which is normally not liked by the academy. Okay? I don't think we have moved to that. But out of the 3 projects what I showed there, project number 3, 150 teachers from our country, they get evaluated on each and every script that they do. Now let me take over 30 seconds, 1 minute slightly, so how it works. Whether it's mechanical engineering, electrical, aeronautics, history, economics, the software will have the system. I'm not saying software. The system will have the ability to evaluate the marker too. That is the way some of the implementations have gone in the country. I'll give you an example. How it works is, there is no magic there. Assume that there are 1,000 scripts in, say, one subject, you pick it up as aeronautical engineering. Out of those 1,000 scripts, about 5%, 7%, 10%. But let me take that example of the third one. 10% of the scripts are pre-marked by head examiners sitting out of UK, say in English, and they are pushed along with these 1,000 scripts. So if I'm a marker, I know that 10% of scripts are pre-marked, but I never know what has been pre-marked. So today, if I'm getting 20, 30 scripts, 3 are pre-marked. When you mark it, the system will automatically check for the deviation, and then you can define the parameters, whether the deviation is beyond 3%, 5%, how do you want to do it? It will again get escalated to the same head examiner who will start reviewing how this marker is marking. You can also even define the system in such a way that the whole marking can stop and it will go back to the predetermined point earlier. So with this, today, if you go to some of the Western countries, the markers are getting evaluated while they are using this system. And in our country, at least one project, luckily the project came from outside the country, our teachers are getting evaluated, but they are all doing very well, much better than any other marker options. So it is possible and it can happen.
Another possibility is a face-to-face. That is, the teachers can hard copy. That's how you set the paper. Like in Australia, they have 10 questions for an exam, which is about 2 hours. Each of the 10 questions has got 3 questions. You can choose one of the 3. But there are 3. It is a linear, not a linear assessment, but it's an adaptive assessment on paper. Very interesting. So each of the 10 questions has got 3 questions. That is difficulty level 1, 2 and 3. Student is asked to say, please choose 10. So out of each of the 10 questions, there are 3 sub-questions and he has to choose one of them. So the student can choose difficulty level 3 all through, or he can choose difficulty level 1 all through. There is a marking difficulty level variation. Immediately you are also able to basically evaluate the student. So many varieties. Do you want to adapt? The question is, at industry level, this is how we quiz. So what I'm saying is we have to work very closely in partnership. So there are 3 points. One is an overarching accreditation system that defines quality. My question is quality defined 5 years ago the same as today? It is not. So therefore we look for a partnership. Is there any one question? Yes. Please, sir. Supplementary question.
How do you really train the teachers to adapt to the online evaluation?
I'll give you 2 examples, sir. Sanskrit scripts, about 17,000 scripts per mark. The few markers, they had never used a computer. They didn't know what was the enter key. First day they marked 2 scripts, second day 3, and the third, fourth day they were doing 20 plus, 25 plus, they enjoyed it. They never used computer, they have not even used mobile phone. Urdu markers, I'll give you one more example. Urdu markers, pure Urdu, what I would say, English language, Urdu language speakers or teachers, they have not used computers. It's being used. So people who were not exposed to computer are able to use it. The training time given to the markers were 1 day, but most of them got restless within 1 hour and they started doing it. Evaluators. Okay. That is, my apologies to you, but it does not demean anybody. But one of the large board is using the terminology in India as marker, that's why I'm using it. So we use no, sir. No, evaluators. Evaluate. I'm sorry, my apologies to you, sir. Evaluators.
We have the light system available in 2010. But today we will see it, how it actually works. We will demonstrate
My last question.
So no problem.
How you are going to cope up with the connectivity aspect? You see, connectivity is one of the prime aspects which generally say somebody is, say, Samsung controller is connected to the, say, marker or filter, and immediately the connection moves. So in that case, how you are going to, is there any arrangement?
Sir, I come with a connectivity background prior to this. Okay, let me tell you this. When this work is given, you are not buying a software. You are asking for a service from a service provider.
Offline or online?
Sir, it is online. You leave that headache to the service provider. The service provider will get it done.
But the student will come to me and I will have this.
No, sir. We can assure you that a very large project across about 150 schools in remote locations. Sir, in Bihar, 15 different locations.
So one of the things just to answer, sir, is most of these systems are programmed. So there is a power failure, it usually switches off, and when you restart this reboot, it will start it from where you stopped. So there is a built memory system, so that is a safe-based process because we conduct assessments for employment in remote areas, and this is a prerequisite. So the student is doing the exam and he's a high tension because he gets a job with or without that, without getting through that assessment, and it suddenly fluctuates. You don't think that his answers go away. It's all being pre-recorded. So both on LAN and MAN system we get it. And the last question. Oh, you have. So may we thank all of you for being such a wonderful interactive audience, and all of the speakers here. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you everyone for being such a wonderful audience and participating in such an active way. I will now request our session chair to please come and give away the certificates. I would request my colleague Ritika to come with the certificate. Yeah. Can we have Mr. N.C. Jain, please? Mr. Nagendran Sundarajan. Mr. P. Rameshan. Mr. Rameshan, please. Professor Rameshan. Professor A.X. Raja Saab. Dr. M.C. Dilip Kumar. Professor H.S. Dhami. May I please request Mr. N.C. Jain to present the certificate to our session chair, please?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was wonderful having the session under event. We had another discussion and we will break. We will soon be starting another round of discussion in a few seconds, please.